Hey, Anthony. Hey, everyone.
Alrighty. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to them Smith Boys. We have a very, very good show for you all today. We're going to be talking about probably one of the most controversial, galvanizing issues that probably 95% of the world has no idea what it's about. So, what you think, Junior?
Yeah, man, this controversy came out of nowhere. All of a sudden, people start showing up to school board meetings and everything, saying this new demon was destroying the society.
So, go ahead.
Yeah, and then when you ask them what to define the demon, they turn to a big cricket.
Actually, so look, there has been a lot of videos that's been going around about people who are talking about critical race theory, but I think I've seen a lot of them, but I think there's one that really, I would say, captures the essence of all that goes wrong when people don't research for themselves and they just believe what people tell them. So just give me 1 second. I'm going to play this video and then we're going to get into some commentary.
You gonna deliberately teach kids this white kid right here got it better than you because he white? You gonna purposely tell a white kid, oh, the black people are all down and suppressed? How do I have 2 medical degrees if I'm sitting here oppressed? How did I get, first of all, time up, I only got 5 minutes now, not 5 minutes. 2 medical degrees. No mom, no dad in the house. Worked my way through college. Sat there and hustled my butt off to get through college. You gonna tell me somebody that looked like all y'all white folks kept me from doing that? Are you serious? Not one white person ever came to me and said, well, son, you're never gonna be able to get to work because you know the black people. But guess what? What's sickening about this whole thing is what y'all doing right now is already something I do in my community right now to speak out against stuff, because black folks are getting told by other black folks, oh, you know you ain't gonna be able to do nothing out there in the world because them white folks ain't gonna let you get no, oh, you know you're not gonna be able to do it here because you know the white man gonna keep you down. Well, how did I get where I am right now if some white man kept me down? How am I now directing over folks that look just like you guys in this room right now? How? What kept me down? What oppressed me? I worked for myself from off the streets to where I am right now. You gonna sit here and tell me this lie of critical race theory? Of this the reason why black folks can't get ahead because of white folks? Are you kidding me? This is what we come to now. I can't believe we even talking about this right now. The last thing I'm going to say right here is something that's crazy. Martin Luther King said he wanted his kids to grow up in a world where they are judged by the contents of their what? Their character, not their skin. If they letting this stuff go on right now, it is absolutely doing the complete reverse of what he's doing. So when February comes, don't talk about Martin Luther King. When February comes, don't talk about Black History Month. Y'all gonna sit there and just pretty much pee on his grave with this nonsense? That's exactly what's about to happen. Lastly, we are talking about our kids. We are talking about our children. What's so sickening about me, I love the Discovery Channel. You will see that on the Discovery Channel, animals will put their lives on the line to protect their children from danger. Nobody want to get to the heart of the matter, get to the meat of the matter, get to the moral of the story. When it all comes down to it, the person that's going to be suffering from this, the ones going to be hurt from this, is the kids. 10 years from now, if this stuff goes on, whose fault is it going to be? Whose fault is it going to be? Who we going to look back on and blame for this? Because this is stuff we talking about right now. This stuff is going on right now. I do this stuff on a daily basis. I'm in the hood. I'm in the communities. I'm out there with folks in their face. I've been doing this stuff since I was 18 years old, talking to Black folks. And you know what? None of them are buying this nonsense. None of them are. But if you want to implement this into the school system, I guarantee you to the day that I die, I'm going to be the very person right there debunking stuff, tearing stuff down, letting them know they can do exactly what I did and get exactly where I am by putting themselves to work and getting there. And ain't not one white person ever going to keep any of them from getting there. So the CRT stuff, BS.
All right, and that's definitely a lot to unpack. But but before we get into this, I will say it is good on him that he took advantage of a situation that he was born into, and that he's giving back to his community. So I will say definitely get on him for doing that. Now, that being said, go ahead, Junior.
Yeah, man. So basically, two things, man. The first thing is Martin Luther King. People always, it seems like Martin Luther King only gave one speech, and that's in what, 1963. It seems they ignore every other speech he gave since then. Content of character has nothing to do with critical race theory. As a matter of fact, if you want to quote Martin Luther King, there's this book, this excellent book is called Where Do We Go From Here?, where Dr. King talks about clearly the issues dealing with African Americans after the Civil Rights Movement. The systems that were in place, even though you could go and get a seat at the table or get a cup of coffee, you couldn't get a job, you couldn't buy a house. And I think those are in the systems that were in place that prevented that. And I think those are the issues that CRT tries to address. Go ahead, bro.
Oh, I mean, definitely. So one of the things, me and my brother, we've been talking kind of all week about this. And one of the things that I think most people can relate to, especially if you watch 48 Hours or pretty much any lawyer or cop shows, exactly what is a theory? And then how do you test a theory? And that's really what critical race theory is that there was an issue. And let's just be honest, this started back in the 70s and the 80s after the Civil Rights Movement was passed. And one of the issues, his name was Dr. Bell. One of his goals was to try to figure out why Black people weren't rising to the level after all of those rights and stuff that were passed. And so he surmised the theory, and he came up with 5 critical tenets that he was going to test that theory. And that's really all critical race theory is just testing that theory. And so I give you an example. For example, one of the things that critical race theory does, it says that there are systems in place that are inherently racist. And one of the things that we can talk about, let's talk about the housing market. Back in the 70s and the 80s, was there a system in place that kept African Americans from gaining wealth and gaining home ownership? Was there a system in place that, again, kept African Americans from gaining and owning home ownership? And I'll let my brother kind of add to that point.
Oh, so basically what you're saying is that one thing about theories, when people propose a theory, I think they use facts to support the theory,
Correct.
To build up the theory, right? So when you ask, you have a theory that African Americans lack home ownership, right? So what can we do to support that theory? Let's
Test it.
see.
Yeah.
Let's test the theory. Redlining. Right?
For the folks out there who don't know what redlining is, so my brother is a history buff. So for those of you who don't know what redlining is, he'll give you a quick tutorial.
Quick, okay. Basically, it was a practice of banks giving African American loans, were denying them loans in certain areas, and they kept them in certain districts. So and these were devalued areas. So basically, it kept African American from acquiring wealth and moving to better neighborhoods. It kept them locked in certain communities. That's a very simplified definition. I'm sure the attorney that come on later will go more in detail with that.
Correct.
But that's just an example.
And also, if there were African Americans that could afford to buy a house and they wanted to move into majority white neighborhoods, there was this thing called restrictive covenants. So there were a whole lot of systems that were in place. And like I say, this is just one example on how you can test that theory. But we have a couple of guests that we're going to turn over to the experts. We have a couple of guests that we're going to bring in, and they're going to introduce themselves. Let me see. Okay, Dr. Cato, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to let ladies first.
Okay, ladies first. Okay,
lady go
we
first.
can let Ms. Taylor go.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be on here with them Smith boys, talking about this important issue of critical race theory with my co-host, Mr. Cato. My name is Yolanda Taylor. I am a practicing attorney. I've practiced for almost 20 years. I can't believe it. I guess I'm getting older. But I practice primarily now in the area of housing, affordable housing, community economic development law. I'm also an adjunct professor of law at Wake Forest Law School, where I teach a course on the introduction to community lawyering. And in that course, we talk about a lot of these issues. So now I'm wondering, am I teaching critical race theory? Careful, right? But so I'm going to, I'll pitch it to my esteemed colleague tonight, Mr. Cato.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Lionel Cato. I'm a chief officer for learning supports with the Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools. I work primarily with social emotional learning, transitioning students between alternative environments and regular school environments, discipline codes of conduct, trying to support students to prevent problems, keep them in school, work with drug and alcohol programming and things of that nature. And so I'm pleased to be here and be a part of this conversation tonight.
So Miss Yolanda Taylor, me and my brother, we basically talked about one of the tenets of critical race theory that was, are there any laws that are in place during the development of critical race theory? Are there any laws that were in place that prevented African Americans from owning home ownership? And so this is one, I know this is one in your area. So can you kind of expound on that point so that we can kind of test that theory?
Yes, let's test this theory. Okay, let's talk about housing. And we're talking about how not just local individual prejudices or biases may have worked collectively to deny African Americans home ownership opportunities, but we're talking about how this was entrenched, I guess, on the federal level and the state level and in local policy, how Black communities were considered to be undesirable and they were painted red, or a red line. And needless to say, some of that color coding from the old FHA maps, the Federal Housing Administration map, they still exist today, and how you type and characterize housing and neighborhoods. So to test the theory, you say you need some facts. Well, we know that the Federal Housing Administration and private insurance companies work collectively with HOAs to deny African Americans the opportunity of economic mobility, to move from low wealth or poverty-stricken areas to the suburbs. The FHA, as the federal government actually gave home mortgages to white people who then were able to move out of public housing, because everyone was living in public housing after all the wars and
Yeah.
World War I and World War II, and public housing was created to house war veterans. So Black people were living in public housing, white people were living in public housing. It
Yeah,
was
that's a good point.
segregated, but then the government gave white residents in public housing an opportunity to home ownership, and they moved in the suburbs where they were able to build wealth, wealth that they then pass on through generations. So you have, a group of people that inherited wealth, and you had a group of people who inherited poverty because they did not have this opportunity. Even when they were trying to work for companies like Ford Motor Company, it was hard to obtain housing near where they worked. So to your viewers and to all of you who have read The Color of the Law by Richard Rothstein, which is one of the tenets in my class. So that's why I was like, am I teaching critical race theory? Because I think in order for future lawyers to do what I consider to be community lawyering, and that's lawyering that supports a community movement. So so my client, Happy Hill neighborhood, that's the neighborhood that we work in. They're concerned about their community, and they want to have some kind of self-determination around their longevity there, right? And we know that development and gentrification is happening in so many places. So in order to prepare the foundation of lawyers to get from the traditional mode of, I'm gonna sit behind my desk, I'm gonna lead this, come to me, and I tell you what to do, to take off that traditional lawyering hat and just use your legal skills, your research skills, and support, community movements. We don't direct it, but if the community is concerned about housing, then lawyers can support it. So I know it's a long-winded answer, but yes. So the facts are the facts. Those maps, those red line maps still exist. That's Exhibit A. We're in court. They still exist. And I have a client group in Rocky Mount where the city did a housing report on its housing stock, and those same colors like red, orange, and green were still used to determine what neighborhoods had dilapidated housing that were vacant.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, all 13 neighborhoods that were red were Black neighborhoods. So this trickle down effect from redlining still exists.
So
Wow.
go ahead, Junior.
No, go ahead, bro. Go ahead.
So Dr. Cato, from your perspective as an educator, have you had any interaction with parents or with their concerns about what's being taught to their schools about indoctrination or any of those things?
Yeah, here I would say in the last year or so, that has been a major thing. It's a false argument. The educators typically, generally, had never even heard of critical race theory until this argument leaders in the past year or so, past couple of years. They're trying to equate critical race theory with good teaching, essentially, trying to teach a more holistic picture of historical truths. The revision of our curriculum in North Carolina just recently happened, our social studies standards. And really, there's nothing new under the sun. I mean, teachers don't know what critical race theory is. Nobody's trying to indoctrinate anybody. We're trying to become better at educating our youth, which we admittedly, I can admit that we've not done the best job of that, Black, white, or otherwise, for a long time. If we ever did, there's so many things that we never learned in school, and that may make people uncomfortable, and they want to equate that with critical race theory, but there's no equating the two. There may be when you look at systems and you look at data, you can't argue with data. We have some very, very serious disparities in every indicator in education and every indicator in real life, and outside of education. And a lot of times those disparities break down along the racial lines, and you can't argue with that. Why is that the case? Educators, we like to say that we believe all students can learn. Well, if we really believe that, then why aren't all students learning? And why doesn't it seem like our students of color
Yeah.
are learning so much less than other students? And unless you really don't believe that all students can learn, if you believe that certain students are just more prone to be discipline problems, or they're more prone to have disabilities and have learning difficulties and behavior issues just by the virtue of their color and their race or ethnicity, I mean, there's lots of other factors to take into account, of course, but unless you really believe that, then you have to look at the systems, you have to look at policies, you have to look at the way the climate that's created in certain schools and in certain school systems towards students of color and parents of color. You know, it's not all socioeconomic. People like to use socioeconomics as a cloak for the issue, but there are poor white kids who do great in school and never have any issues and don't have discipline issues. And I mean, so that argument is not, you know, valid.
Dr. I'm sorry, Dr. Cato.
Go ahead, bro.
Yes, sir, Dr. Cato. Here's $1 million question. Is critical race theory being taught in schools?
No, it's not part of the curriculum at all.
Okay. I want to make sure now. If a parent, now I'm a teacher. I'm a social studies teacher as well. But if a parent has concerns about why or what they want to know what their child is being taught, where can they go to find that information out?
Well, I mean, everybody should be following the state standards, which is on all those standards are on the state website, very plain and clear. Now, I will say, teachers are human, okay? And things happen. I was thinking back to things that I've seen and heard when I was in school. And, you know, people say things and they may present something in a certain way that is not the best way to present it, but they're human. It's not like this massive conspiracy to be disrespectful or to make people feel like they don't have a place in this society or in a place in our schools. But the state website, the teachers most teachers have syllabuses or syllabi, and they have, you know, you can find this same information on your school system's website. There's no big secret as to what's being taught.
Yeah, thank you. And I tell you, like Attorney Taylor, she mentioned at one tenet of critical race theory as far as housing is concerned. From the perspective of education, as a parent, as an African-American parent, I can give a good example, a good illustration. When it talks about why African-Americans are less represented in AP classes, things of that nature, AP programs. Yeah, so case in point, I'm about to go there right quick. So our children, very smart kids coming out of elementary school, they were all fives on the EOCs, straight A's and everything, right? When we get to enroll them in high school, when it's time to enroll for honors and AP classes, it's teacher recommendation. Not one teacher from the elementary school recommended them for AP classes, despite the fact that they had fives and straight A's on the EOCs. And some of their white counterparts with lesser scores were recommended. And so when you talk about systems, and that just thankfully me and my wife, we know better, we know to put our children in, but think about how many generations of African Americans who had the ability and talent, how their lives would change just for the fact they weren't put in classes. And I'm not even going to go to the discipline thing, which you alluded to. So yes, when you talk about these things about systems and practices that create outcomes that are disparate for certain races, we can't ignore, as you said, the data and why that's in place. And what's happened to me goes on still goes on today. So I want to put that out there.
So what would you all say that having these conversations create to a divisive climate?
I mean, like Mr. Cato said, you know, when I was in school, you know, I only remember like some black shadowy figures like hiding behind a door, and that was the extent of our history.
Yeah.
So, I mean, did that create a division with us? I think it's more about like who gets to tell our story and when can we actually bring validity to our story, our history, and our contributions to this society. I'm on a board of a school. It's a charter school, you know, and I know there's some controversy with that too. But because of, you know, the barriers to providing, you know, education to our children, you know, I decided that I wanted to, you know, create a school that's not stereotypical, like exclusive,
Mhm.
but that's very diverse, and to give our children opportunities. And I know that can be debated, but a parent came to our board meeting, and the only thing she wanted to know after waiting hours to speak was, y'all not teaching critical race theory, are you? You know, so we're just like, first of all, like you stated, Derek Bell, I mean, it was a legal scholarship. It's been taught like in law school and legal scholarship, not like, you know, in K through 12, even though I think my history should be taught. But, you know, what our response was, you know, as a board, I'm reading it, we're committed to creating an environment that values inclusivity, respect, and diversity. This commitment manifests primarily in how the school approaches text choice, faculty setup, and conversations around text. You know, so we were just giving them examples of how we want to bring more diverse voices and family representations into the way we teach and how we partner, you know, with parents. So, you know, so all schools are trying to come up with a way, I guess, to respond to this. You know, and I don't know what she thought about that. Maybe, you know, because some people get upset when you say diversity
Yeah.
or inclusivity, you know. So, but I think it's really I mean, what we're talking about institutional racism, systemic racism, that's real. But I think this whole like new like critical race theory argument, it's just a manufactured issue, I feel personally, for political gain. You know, I just think it's something, you know, that's not really happening in the K through 12, you know, area. But should we, you know, expand history? I think so.
Part of the bigger picture, and I've talked with several people about this before, is, you know, there's a lot of fear. Demographics are changing in lots of parts of the country. You know, and we've known this for a long time, at least since the 90s, that the demographics were changing and which populations were growing and which one birth rates were slowing down. And so it's like you have this visceral, this not necessarily visceral, it is visceral for some people.
It's visceral, yeah.
You have this response of these different movements that come up to try to prevent immigration, that try to prevent people from having certain privileges that other groups were afforded a generation ago, or you know, 2 generations ago, when we say we're a nation of immigrants, but then you really find out, well, it's certain immigrants that we want, and others we're going to put up roadblocks, and that's not anything new. I mean, we did the same thing. I mean, that's been since the birth of the country. They've tried to control certain countries' immigration here to America, but in 2021, you would think that we would progress enough to where we wouldn't still be doing the same thing, and we're saying terrible things about our Latino citizens, and it's all about a loss of power. People, there's certain power groups, and it's primarily, you know, the stereotypical white male power group that has been in control of so many things for so many years. Some don't want to share the power. Some don't want to allow other groups to be able to come up. Why do women still get paid less than a man for the same work, the same job? Why is this belief that if I'm taught as a child things that actually happened historically, because when I found out about it as an adult, it's going to really make me angry. When I find out about Wilmington race riots, when I found out about what happened in New Bern after the Civil War to the Black population in New Bern, you know, why can't we talk about these things? You look at eugenics. We don't learn anything about eugenics in school. You look at the flooding, the intentional flooding of Black towns across the country. I was shocked. I'd never heard of it.
Yeah.
Intentional flooding of Black towns for various reasons across the country. Redlining is something that was mentioned. I have Henrietta Lacks.
Wow.
Henrietta Lacks. Tuskegee, Japanese internments. But we learn a lot about the Holocaust and we learn a lot about the Civil War, especially in the South. We spend a lot of time talking about the Civil War, the war of Northern aggression. You know, so it's like, why do we have to wait till we get grown to learn that Central Park was built on land owned by people of color and people that, you know, were just pushed aside to build a park?
And then also, what about the interstate system?
Yeah,
I don't know that one. I don't know about that one. I might get angry. I might get more angry tonight if I hear the story.
Well, you're about to. Let me go ahead and throw it out there, man.
Go ahead and throw it out there, man. Go ahead and throw it out for the people to back.
To answer, listen, when you're accustomed to a privilege, equality feels like oppression. and that's just the bottom line. So just put it out there. And secondly, you gotta understand when redlining, let's not talk about redlining. Let's talk about the practice of zoning boards intentionally targeting prosperous African American communities and putting highways through them. Look at Durham. Look at Durham. Went through the Haytime district. And New Bern. Look at James City, right?
Look at Winston-Salem.
Winston-Salem.
Highway 52.
So you have these prosperous African American communities and these zoning boards intentionally, and they still taking land from in James City from us back to water in the domain for the airport.
Yeah.
See what I'm saying? So it seems that what they say, urban renewal, Negro removal. That's what they say.
See.
I just had to go. I'm just saying, man. I'm just saying. But like I said, so, and we even look at Tulsa, right? Tulsa, you had bankers, you had hotels, you had wealth that would have been passed down from generation to generation. And so when that's burned and destroyed, that destroys an entire generational dynamic, right? And even when Tulsa rebuilt, they put a highway through the Greenwood district. You see what I'm saying? So when you look at these issues, what kind of outcomes comes as a result of something like that? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, and that's a very good point. And I'll just throw this out here. Now, again, I'm no expert in critical race theory. I didn't go to law school, but I did stay in a Holiday Inn last night. But anyway, no, in all seriousness, though, this theory does not focus on individual people. And so one of the things that when I looked at all these videos, it says that it teaches African American people of color that they are oppressed, and it teaches that in turn white folks are oppressors. And there's nothing in any of my studies or anything that I've researched that that point to that they're focusing on one individual. Again, it's about the systems that are in place.
I think what's happened, man, I think you got a combination of sincere ignorance, sincere ignorance and willful ignorance. More so than willful ignorance. I think people are conflating critical race theory with horrible events that happen in history, and they're trying to draw them together. And like I said, to your point, man, critical race theory does not focus on individual behavior. It focuses on systems in place. So when the gentleman in your video talks about Martin Luther King and content of character, that has nothing to do with critical race theory at all. And the thing is, and this is just a personal opinion, I think the why there's so much backlash about critical race theory, because it does examine systems. And it does examine, and back to what Dr. Cato said, who control those systems and who benefits from those systems. And when you start to critically analyze those systems, then the issue of restorative justice comes in. Like what happened in California when they took the Black folks' land at the beach and they voted to give the land back to them. Restorative justice, it belonged to them. I guess something like that will make a lot of people in Wilmington and a lot of places around the country kind of nervous about those kind of things.
Yeah.
When you go back and look at how African Americans lost all that generational wealth and whatever. So when you start to analyze these things and you start to talk about taking apart unfair systems and put fair practice in place, diversity and inclusion in place, then it starts to threaten those who've had the power. You know, diversity feels like oppression too. All right, I'll back off.
And I think, and I totally agree, James, with what you're saying. And I think too that schools are being forced into a corner, like teachers are afraid, like this overreaching, even by our state General Assembly, where, you know, they passed what's House Bill 324, the ostensibly ensuring dignity and non-discrimination in schools. That's what critical race theory is trying to do. You know, you're trying to create a society where there's dignity and there's non-discrimination. And I mean, I know some people are backing away from the term critical race theory, but the way we were describing it today, we're talking about systems of injustice that continues to perpetuate, you know, denial of economic opportunity, you know, not the best healthcare treatment, denying political power. You know, we've seen in criminal justice reform. I mean, I don't want to play into their game and then say it's a bad thing, because just like they try to make it seem as if Black Lives Matter was bad. But then after George Floyd, it became more mainstream. Well, you know, well, we're not necessarily talking about the organization Black Lives Matter, but it does make sense, you know, to say that, you know, our lives should matter just as equally, right, as other lives. So I don't know. I don't know what the agenda is behind this whole like parents rushing into school, but the same parents are rushing, talking about critical race theory. You know, they're talking about no mask. I mean, they're talking about a whole host of issues. And I think so many things are now being attributed to critical race theory. You know, even the Black Lives Matter movement is now being attributed to critical race theory. And I kind of like think that's not fair. But
if you take a look at the report that our Lieutenant Governor put out, the quote unquote the report of all the indoctrination that's going on across the state. So there were probably, I would say, 500 and some odd submissions from across the state. And I mean, I don't have numbers, actual percentages, but I do know that a significant number of those submissions were actually against what they were doing. And they were complaining about them wasting people's time doing this. And teachers were saying, you know, you're making our jobs harder. There were some things that were raising an eyebrow, like, did this really happen? But there was a lack of evidence. There was a lack of real concrete, like this happened. You don't have any kind of artifacts, anything to prove that what you're saying is true and really happened. And a lot of it was stuff that should have been happening. It was good teaching. They just didn't like it. You know, Black Lives Matter was mentioned in there. In some of those statements, there was a lot of stuff about masks in there. And it's like, this has nothing to do with anything. You're just mad about whatever. And you just want to add in. So when you boil down to it, if I go through all 500 of them, I really wonder how many of them were actually legitimate concerns that a teacher may have overstepped or something. I remember coming through school, and James, Anthony, and I, we all went to the same high school, but at different times. They're a little bit older than me.
Come on now.
But I remember a teacher making racist jokes in an AP U.S. history class. You know, and there were 3 Black kids there, and I don't think that she really that they were inappropriate. I mean, just roll right on out. And, we're kids. And so you don't really know what to say or how to react, when you're a kid. But I mean, I've taught with teachers who refuse to teach evolution. I've taught with teachers.
Hold on,
and
you
they
talking
were- they
about
were-
hey,
they were-
Dr. Kidder, are you talking about the theory of evolution?
Yeah, they refused to
Okay.
teach it because they believed in that
The
they were really strong Christians and they didn't believe in evolution. And so nobody complained. They were one of the best teachers and they taught science, for crying out loud.
Whoa.
I've taught with teachers who have said things to children about anti-abortion. They didn't support so-and-so because they supported abortion and talking to kids about abortion and things like that. So teachers are human. There are going to be things that are said on either side that may be inappropriate, but it's not some massive conspiracy to indoctrinate children. I mean, people just say things they ought not to say sometimes.
Well, man, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
Listen, when I'm teaching the 14th Amendment, right, I have to teach why the 14th Amendment came into existence. I have to teach about the Black codes, right? I have to teach about the Jim Crow laws and things of that nature. Why was it necessary? You have to teach about why the Civil Rights Movement was necessary. You have to teach about where the Fair Housing Act was passed, what was going on, what school desegregation, what was going on. So facts don't care about your feelings at all. And so that's just like you teach about the Holocaust, right? So back again, like I'm saying, I'm trying to still understand as everybody's, why are people, and I think the answer before, why are people coming in these places going crazy over this? And really, I think people want to be comfortable in their ignorance. I think people want to be comfortable in their low-key racism. Nobody likes when their racism is exposed and called out, And when you have things like George Floyd that causes a microscope to be examined on everything, then what happened? The racists are upset and the closet racists are upset. And they come with these issues and they feel they can't come out and just say I'm a racist. So they gotta find some type of issue to filter their racism through, right? I don't want to call you the N-word, but let me call the police on you for walking your dog in your own neighborhood.
Yeah.
So, those type of things. So I just wanted to put that out there.
And to your point, James, they're also creating this like fake falsehood that there's such a thing as reverse racism. So that's what they're basically saying. They're saying that to teach this will cause reverse racism against white people because now because the undergirding fear, and I don't want to sound cliche, I do have white friends I love and respect, who I don't think are racist, but they have told me that the undergirding fear is the big payback. They are scared because of everything that's happened in history. There's going to be a big payback. And I don't know why they feel that way. I mean, because, culturally, our race has been a very forgiving race, a very, it's getting further away from Christianity, I think, because we're becoming more diverse and with different perspectives, but, traditionally Christian, so this notion that, America's becoming browner, people found out the truth, what do they think we're going to do? Burn down their cities? I mean, maybe doing a protest. Some people have done that, but I mean, what is the fear? What's the real fear? Getting to the root of the fear. What is it to create this concept? And to me, they're creating division now. This concept and fear. Teachers are afraid, like, well, are they going to think this is critical race theory? So, but yeah, to your point, if you're teaching, you have to teach, right? You got to tell the truth and the unvarnished truth, right? If you're trying to be, a teacher and you're trying to bring context to why this happened. It's not just that King March, the end,
Who wants to briefly talk about another one of the tenets, which is intersectionality?
Man, you throwing big words out there, man.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, It's a law school class, so I got to use those big words. Man.
Okay.
No, I didn't learn this in my bachelor's degree.
I'll let Ms. Taylor talk on that because I'm not as familiar with it as she is, since it's a legal thing.
Well, I don't know if it's legal. I went to a diversity inclusion training, right? And that's when I heard about it. Because like you're saying, there's a lot of things we were not taught, right? We're all learning this in our adulthoods, facts and history that we should have learned. But now intersectionality is this new thing, like how, maybe class intersects with race, how maybe gender orientation intersects with race, in this class, I learned that, women, like you stated, are paid less. And sometimes some people try to meet their quote unquote diversity quota by hiring, let's say, Black men. And they were like, well, we got Black people. And then they're hiring white women. But, you don't have Black women. Oh, well, we met that quota because we hire a Black man and we hire a white. So we met the issue of gender. And we talk about men and women, if you're that exclusive to just men and women, we got women, they're white women in the firm, and we got Black people in the firm, and they're Black men. But then, Black women, what's the intersection? It's like I have the double whammy, right? "Quote unquote" double whammy.
Right,
I'm
right,
Black,
right.
I'm Black, and I'm a woman. But then, you're not really looking at the intersection, of like how things intersect, gender and race.
You
That's
can
my
even look
understanding
at
of it.
you can even look at that from the standpoint of one of the big things that people attack, or some people attack, was affirmative action. And you're looking at like the minority women business incentives that corporations will give, but a lot of those contracts go to businesses owned by white women, and they're given at least 51% ownership of the business, which benefits their husband and their family. And so you're not really affirmative action is not really necessarily addressing the things that people think that it's addressing. But
that's a whole nother episode right
Boy,
there.
That's a whole nother topic.
yes.
There's a whole nother topic for another day.
Good gracious,
But just thinking about how those things intersect, and when the Me Too movement started, I had to understand that I had privilege as a male more than I thought that I had. Even I'm a Black male, so I have some things that historically have not been in my favor as a Black male. But as a man, there are things that I don't have to worry about. I have to embrace my privilege, that women have to worry about people maybe grabbing on them if they wear a certain outfit and saying certain things to them that I don't have to worry about, or even approaching them or trying to force them into things that I don't have to worry about. I think some of this is the fact that there are groups of people who don't own their privilege. They don't see that they are privileged just by virtue of their birth. Being born white, being born a male, being born white, period. There's certain things that come with that. And people have to understand that and accept that, but not enough people have, which is why we're also seeing some of this. The fear and the fact that we're all equal, there's one race, the human race, and and that kind of stuff. We're colorblind. We're not colorblind. If we're colorblind, you don't see me. You don't see my experience and my reality. And I don't think enough people have done that.
Speaking of race, is race a thing, or is it like a social construct? I don't know.
It's is that a rhetorical question?
That's a good question.
Of course, it's a social construct, and especially in if I don't want to give a history lesson, whatever, but of course, once you start codifying law and codifying behavior, and saying one group cannot read, is looking for one group to read, you have to step across the street. You can't marry this. Of course, they're using race as a construct to codify laws to oppress a certain group. you know, that's one of those facts that build up the theory, critical race theory. I want to go there. But I'm just saying, of course, it's a social construct. And it's also a mental defect, because what's happened is that, unfortunately, especially in America, and nobody likes to talk about it, but there are two things going on. The first thing that's going on is that we've been socially conditioned because of historical dynamics to believe that one group is superior and one group is inferior. And what happens is having a superiority complex is just as damaging as having an inferiority complex. But the problem is when the people with the superiority complex controls the levers of power, then that causes an adverse effect on people. And so, of course, to your question, little bro, race is a social construct, and race is being used to codify law and all types of things all through history. I don't want to get too much into one thing about what Dr. Cato brought up about affirmative action. And my brother says a whole nother show. Just so you know, the number one beneficiary of affirmative action is not African Americans. Okay, just gonna put that out there in the atmosphere. That may be another show, little bro.
So look, I see a question that just came in, and I'm gonna get a shout out to one of my really, really good friends, Slatter Hammond. So this is the question that he posed. He says, how does intersectionality prioritize which oppressed group takes precedence over the other? Gender, culture, race, sexual orientation, or religion? If two or more of the above groups' priorities were to be in conflict, how is that resolved?
My understanding of it, and I don't know what you guys have to say, is that it's not about maybe prioritizing one group over another. I mean, and it's even beyond the construct of race. It's classism, it's sexism, it's xenophobia. You know, it's all these things because I mean, yeah. So it's about, like Dr. Cato said, seeing us. You know, we want to be seen. You know, because if we're trying to create a more equitable society, diversity and inclusion has to be intentional. So in order for it to be intentional, you can't just say, oh, I have Black people. You totally forgot about Black women. You can't just say, oh, I have white women. You totally forgot about Asian women. You know, you can't just say, you know, I have men who are all straight. You know, maybe you forgot about someone who was part of the LGBTQAI, you know, LGBTQTAI group, you know, so yeah, from what I've learned, it's about looking at how all these identities intersect in order to create a more equitable society. You know, you're actually looking at people and their identities.
And along in the same vein, with the critical race theory, you know, false arguments that are happening, especially with education. Just a couple of years ago, we had the bathroom bill that came out in North Carolina that was supposed to solve a problem that nobody even knew we had, because it wasn't a problem. And so it brings all this attention on the state, and then it, you know, because if you don't fit into a certain category, you might be a white male, but if you happen to be a white male that's gay and Christian, or a white male that's that may be a trans person, and that's that is not in the typical mainstream, quote unquote, mainstream straight white male Christian, then you were being pushed out. Like there was legislation that came out, and it became a big thing nationwide, which didn't change until it impacted the state financially, and then they started to change some things because of that. The green ultimately in America is the color that matters most. You start messing with the money, and so that's another thing. People of color have a lot of buying power. We have a lot of financial power that is not necessarily always aligned and organized in a way, but businesses and organizations know that. And so you start to cater to certain groups of people, certain immigrant groups, because those groups are growing, and that causes this backlash. They don't care about me anymore. You know, why do I have to send my kid to a school that has Spanish on the door? That's a question we got a couple of years ago. Why do I have to send my kid to a school that has Spanish translations on the door? why do I have to sit through a Spanish translation of a phone call before I hear the English or something? I mean, it's the reality that some people are just, it triggers something in them that forces these types of arguments that just are not there. There's nothing to be argued. I mean, it's not there.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna say this whole, like, when we're talking this construct of race, it boils down to who gets benefits and who gets privileges. And to what Dr. or Mr. Cato stated, I don't know, I'm attributing to you to be a doctor. I'm sorry if that's not right or wrong, but I mean, Dr. Cato stated that as a Black man, he has privileges, right? And so the way I've seen critical race theory taught, it's about knowing what your privileges are. It's okay to be privileged. It doesn't mean that you deserved it or you earned it. It just so happens to be. And all privilege means is that, you may have, it doesn't mean that you have never suffered or struggled or have financial problems or disappointments or setbacks. It just means that maybe your race wasn't a reason for any of those issues, right?
Wow.
Or because you're a man, the problems that you had wasn't because you were a man, or because you're a Christian in America, which is, I think, is still the most dominant religion. I don't know. That's increasingly becoming, a minority religion, just because of the hate and the fear and the rhetoric, by Christians supposedly. But I did a test, and this is why I think intersectionality is important, because I took one of those equity diversity tests, and I'm a woman with a law degree. I worked really hard, went to school too long to get this degree. But I mean, on the scale of 1 to 10, I was a 5. 10 being the person with the most privilege. And it was a white man in the room. And he's like, I'm always a 10. I knew I was going to be a 10, and then there was a young girl who was, I think, English wasn't her second language. She was born here, but her parents were immigrants. She was like a -1, and the Black men in the room were probably like a 6 or 7. I got dinged because I'm over 40. When you're over 40, you get dinged because that's considered to be, in this society, a X, as well, the older you get. So just to sit there and just to know how hard I work, and how, if there is equality in this world, that I feel I should have been an 8, a 9, or a 10, but I was a 5, and that's what institutional and systemic racism is. It's invisible barriers. You don't even know that they're operating. But when you take a test like that, and every time you take a test like that, a white man is number 10, then you realize there are privileges and benefits that I may be denied and not even know. So to that video y'all played in the beginning, where you're talking about character, and because I made it, like our lieutenant governor is saying in North Carolina, I made it. This systemic racism that exists. Well, he probably could have been farther along a whole lot sooner, right? If institutional racism did not exist. Anyway, I digress. Sorry, I just had to say that.
Absolutely, I agree 100% with you.
Anybody have any other closing thoughts? I know it's a very special night. NFL football is back, so we're going to try to keep this under hours. So we have about 4 minutes. So if anybody wants to give some of their closing comments, now's the time to do that.
So, I will say that, again, our demographics are changing. And if we are going to remain a country and not tear each other apart, with things like what we saw at the Capitol on January 6th, and some of the Karen moments around the country that are happening, over ridiculous things. Like, I mean, if we don't come together and figure this thing out, the right people need to get at the table and really make this embrace one another and make sure that we are bringing people along and not trying to keep people out of the seats of power. We've got to figure out how we're going to govern together, how we're going to live together, how we're going to raise our kids together. The kids will be fine. The adults are the ones that have the problem.
Yeah.
The kids will tell you they want to learn. They want to learn about things. Black and white kids and brown kids, they would tell you they want to go to school together. They want to learn about things that happen. They get very upset when they can't learn certain things. History is boring. They sleep through history class
Mhm.
because it's boring. But they
Not my
really want to
class.
learn. They want to learn these types of things. But when you've got these politicians that are doing things that they're doing and bringing in critical race theory that doesn't even exist,
Yeah.
it makes teachers back up. They're talking about making teachers put lesson plans online for everybody to see them, and all kinds of foolish acts. I mean, it's like, let's get it together, folks. We've got to do this. Otherwise, we won't have a country much longer. We're changing. We are changing. It is going to happen.
Well,
So either we're gonna embrace it and make it happen well, or it's gonna happen in a bad way. But it's gonna happen one way or the other.
my closing remark is short and sweet. Read up before you speak up. If you're going to go out and yell and oppose something, at least have a understanding of what you're talking about. So read up before you speak up.
I guess my closing argument is to those who believe in critical race theory and who are going to all the school board meetings and all of that, and who usually align themselves with Christianity. So I'm going to quote something from the Bible. My people perish because of a lack of knowledge, right? And literally, in this health pandemic, people are perishing due to a lack of knowledge, right?
Wow.
Due to a lack of knowledge, due to educating yourself or being afraid of education, so that's all I have to say. We're going to perish. So to ditto to Dr. Cato's point earlier, this is about moving forward together and not causing division, because we are really trying to ensure dignity and non-discrimination in the school by teaching history.
So Attorney Taylor, so I actually wrote down, these are what we're seeing. A lot of are the last gasps of a sorely broken system. And we need to embrace one another, or we will surely perish together.
That's deep. Yeah.
That's deep. Stolen.
Yeah. Knowledge is power. So look, I'd like to thank you, Dr. Cato and Attorney Taylor, for joining us today. I hope for the people who are here listening, I hope you learned something today. And for the folks who may be listening in at another time, look, we're in this thing together. I mean,
yes,
that's the thing. We're in this thing together, and the only way that we can move forward is to have these type of conversations in good faith, not trying to be, I think that's the word that I use, is having good faith conversations where you are really intent on trying to learn from one another. That's all I have. Everybody, hey, how about them Cowboys? Nope, I'm joking. I am joking. All right, we're signing off.
All right.
Good evening.
All right. Peace.